I think they say in show business you should never follow the act with the kids in it, but here goes. Some of you might remember this old high school parenting assignment, or maybe you watched your own kids struggle through it like my wife and I did. The teacher hands you a 10-pound sack of flour and tells you to pretend that it's a baby. Do you remember that one? You're asked to draw a face on it, even put clothes on it, and then you're told that for the next week, you're not allowed to put it down. You have to carry it everywhere. It sounds silly, but even teens quickly get the point of the lesson. This thing is incredibly fragile. You can't just toss it in your locker or leave it in the car. If you bump it too hard or drop it, it breaks. If it gets wet, it's ruined. So you spend the whole week terrified of messing up your sack of flour. Of course, the adults involved hope this exercise helps teens realize that they aren't really ready to care for a baby. But even more importantly, I think it teaches them something important about love itself. That love requires vulnerability. Love requires us to take the risk of entering the world of the other and welcoming them into our own. For the teen to love the pretend baby the way it needs to be loved, they have to think about how vulnerable babies really are, how fragile and dependent they are, and adapt their own lives to it. But the vulnerability of the baby requires the teen to be vulnerable too. They have to be willing to be seen carrying around a sack of flour disguised as a baby. They have to endure potential ridicule and deal with the inconvenience of keeping it with them at all times. To love their new baby, they have to be constantly aware of the baby's vulnerability and to be vulnerable themselves. Who would have thought that a 10-pound sack of flour or a baby could teach us something important about love? And yet that is exactly the lesson of Christmas. Because on Christmas, God entered a world that desperately needed his love. And to show us his love, he entered the world as a baby. It's a very strange way to rescue the world, don't you think? The world cries out for help, and God hands us a baby. But God knew what he was doing. To rescue the world, God had to show us what love is really like. He had to teach us the risks of vulnerability. So God himself, in the person of his Son, left what was comfortable and safe and entered our world. He lived in our skin, walked around in our shoes. And to initiate his project, he risked experiencing what it is like to be utterly fragile and dependent, entering the world just as we do, as a baby. But Jesus' birth was just the beginning. He risked vulnerability his entire life. Instead of shielding himself with riches and possessions, he chose to be born in poverty. Instead of finding safety by being part of the in crowd, he chose to associate with social outcasts. Instead of amassing political power, He chose to speak truth to those in charge and subjected himself to execution on a Roman cross. Why? Because he loves us. And vulnerability is at the heart of love. But love isn't just about the risk of entering the world of the other. It's also taking the risk of welcoming them into your own world. It's letting them see you for who you really are. And that's a real risk. When you let someone into your world, showing them who you truly are and what is important to you, you're giving them the power to hurt and even reject you. But without taking those risks, you can never really love another, and you'll never really know what it means to be loved. And if we're honest, that kind of love is terrifying, isn't it? That's why we often do the exact opposite. When we feel insecure, we don't open up, we armor up. We hide our true selves behind carefully curated social media posts and professional masks. We prefer control to intimacy. We prioritize safety over love. We fool ourselves into thinking that if we're just strong enough or smart enough or powerful enough, we can actually save ourselves. And then we try to convince ourselves that we're happy, that it's enough. But we know that it isn't. It isn't enough, because the walls that we build to keep pain out also keep love out. You cannot truly be loved if you are never truly known. In his book, The Four Loves, C.S. Lewis puts it this way: to love at all is to be vulnerable. Love anything, and your heart will be wrung and possibly broken. If you want to make sure of keeping it intact, you must give it to no one. Wrap it carefully round with hobbies and little luxuries. Avoid all entanglements. Lock it up safe in the casket or the coffin of your selfishness. But in that casket, safe, dark, motionless, airless, it will change. It will not be broken. It will become unbreakable, impenetrable, irredeemable. To love is to be vulnerable. So to save us from the suffocating armor of our own self-protection, God had to show us what love is really like. To lure us outside of our armor, he had to show us the power of vulnerability. Christmas invites us to that same courageous kind of love. It invites us to leave our places of comfort and safety, just as Jesus has, and to meet others where they are, to walk around in their experiences, and to welcome them into our hearts as well. Now, I want to be clear. Vulnerability is not the same as being naive. It does not mean being a doormat or giving people a blank check to abuse you. Love also requires us to draw boundaries and say no at times. But it is still love. Jesus certainly did. But when we draw lines, we do it in love, for the good of the other as well as ourselves, wanting them to know the love of Christ and be rescued too. So, how will you receive the Christ child this Christmas? You cannot hold this baby if you are holding up a shield. You cannot welcome him into your world if you are too busy defending it. He took the risk of entering the world. Now he invites you to take the risk of welcoming him into your heart. Don't hide the messy parts. Don't tidy up the stable of your heart before you let him in. Let him see you as you really are. The message of the manger is that it is safe to be vulnerable because God has been and is vulnerable with us. So tonight the invitation is simple. Put down the armor, pick up the child. Take the risk of welcoming him into your life, just as he took the risk of entering yours. It's the only way to be fully known and the only way to be truly loved. Merry Christmas. Amen.